Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another live stream, the last live stream of 2023. How are you all doing today? It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong, and we have a great stream coming up. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications bell, and do support this program in any way you can on this holiday season. The best place being Patreon, but there's also Substack, YouTube, and one-time options like Buy Me a Coffee and more in the video description. But it's great to be with all of you this evening, at least where I am. Good morning and good afternoon for those who are joining in those time zones. Hope you're all doing good. I have a lot to get to today, so let me just break it down. First, let me just show you the shirt. This is the Constitution of Vietnam, basically outlining Ho Chi Minh's face. I got this in Vietnam. Of course, in August 1945, Vietnam became officially independent from colonial France. And I decided to wear that tonight because I feel like it's fitting, talking about geopolitical developments of 2023 and representing what I believe is reflective of all of these changes, which is a growing thirst, a growing hunger, and the actualization of that hunger for real self-determination, real multipolarity, real independence from the empire. That's what we are talking about here tonight. We're going to have three stories that we're going to get to. We're going to get to two Ukraine-related stories. Of course, you all might be aware of the latest escalations in the conflict in Ukraine. You have a huge Russian strike on Kiev, more than 100 missiles. I believe it was nearly 150 missiles launched at Kiev. You have very suspicious circumstances about the casualty numbers, I believe, and I will show you why I believe that it was Kiev's air defense systems that malfunctioned or misfired and killed essentially Ukrainians in Kiev. But of course, Russia is being blamed for those deaths. And now there's been an attack on Volgograd, the city in Russia bordering Ukraine. And there have been atrocities. I mean, these are real legitimate atrocities committed by Ukraine. So we're going to go over that story. We're going to talk about Ukraine's terrible 2024, just a nightmarish 2024 to kind of launch the New Year conversation. And then we're going to get into China basically kicking the butt, or the butts, I should say, of the U.S. intelligence apparatus, the CIA in particular. You all want to stick around for those stories, and then I will get into a bit of a broader assessment of 2024, as well as many announcements at the end. So please do. We have over 2,267 beautiful viewers right now. Keep hitting that like button, 673 likes. If you hit that like button, YouTube will boost this stream in the algorithm, and that helps greatly get more people in the stream. Happy New Year. We are counting down the final minutes, hours, the final days. We're really in the last day or so, at least in the New Year's calendar out in the United States and the West. So we have a lot to get to. It's been a momentous year. It's been a great year with all of you. And I am so happy I can do this stream right before the end of it to celebrate it with you. So those are the three stories. That's what we got going on tonight. Let's get started, okay? While you are here, be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. This channel has experienced momentous growth because of all of you. You all have been incredible, and I really appreciate all of the support. And you can support this channel in the video description. So many links, so many places you can get plugged in to contribute to this show and also get some perks back. Okay, so here we go. Russia has hit Ukraine, has hit Kiev in a huge way. And the events that have transpired since have been shocking. On December 29th, Russia launched a massive missile strike campaign. Over 150 missiles, I believe. There are 158 or so counted now. Underreporting from the Western mainstream media, of course, going on. But it caused massive damage to Ukraine's military and logistical sites And of course, Russia is being blamed for the civilian casualties that have come about. And we're going to get into why I believe there is a lot of warranted suspicion about the accusations against Russia. But nonetheless, these strikes occurred and they rocked the Western mainstream media headlines that night. And there has been a response. Kiev has attacked and committed atrocities in the Russian border city of Volgograd. There are at least 29 people, I believe, and we'll get into that story later, killed, including children. And now these escalations have reached a fever pitch to end 2023. But here is how the Western mainstream media reported this story. This is from the Associated Press. It said Russia launches biggest aerial barrage of the war and kills 30 civilians, says Ukraine. Russia launched 122 missiles. I believe that's an undercount because there are also dozens of drones, as they say, against Ukrainian card targets, officials said on Friday, killing at least 30 civilians across the country in what an Air Force official called the biggest aerial barrage of the war. At least 144 people were wounded, and an unknown number were buried under rubble, roughly during the 18-hour onslaught. A maternal hospital, apartment blocks, and schools were among the buildings reported having damage in Ukraine. In the capital of Kiev, broken glass and mangled metal littered city streets. Air raided emergency service sirens wailed as plumes of smoke drifted into the light blue sky. Katerina Ivanivna, a 72-year-old Kiev resident, said she threw herself to the ground when the missile struck. There was an explosion, then flames. I covered my head, got down into the street, then I ran to the subway. In Poland, they're saying that what was apparently a Russian missile, this is what's important, had entered the country's airspace Friday morning from the direction of Ukraine and vanished off radars. In the attack on Ukraine, the Air Force intercepted most of the ballistic and cruise missiles and the Shahed-type drones overnight, said Valery Zaluzhny, Ukraine's military chief. Although Russia say none of them were intercepted, they all hit their targets. So, of course, there is a discrepancy there. And we all know Kiev has a propensity for lying through their teeth. So this is known as the largest attack yet in the entire conflict. This is one that was considered to be in a stalemate. But a stalemate looks very different from a full frontal massive missile barrage. So I want to now put on what Russia had to say. So this is from RT, and this is Russia confirming the massive barrage on targets in Ukraine. They said that an overnight operation added to 50 group strikes conducted throughout the week occurred, said the defense ministry. Russia's defense ministry has confirmed its forces launched a series of attacks against multiple targets in Ukraine in the last week. A statement from the ministry on Friday detailed 50 group strikes in a single massive barrage using precision missiles and drones. The ministry described the intended targets as defense industry sites, military airfield infrastructure, and depots for storage or artillery, munitions, naval drones, arms, and fuel for military vehicles, as well as troops' positions. All of them were successfully hit, the statement added. So that's a different story than what we're hearing in the Western mainstream media. Valery Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, reported earlier that day that at least 158 separate launches were detected by Kiev's troops on Thursday evening. He claimed that of the total, 27 drones and 87 cruise missiles were intercepted. So according to Russia, all of them hit. According to Ukraine, they were able to intercept some. Okay, so now I want to get into how the United States reacted, because this is a story that developed quite rapidly. The United States reacted in a huge way, and then Kiev called on the United Nations to convene. And of course, its Western backers helped this along, convened a meeting at the UN Security Council. So here is what Joe Biden had to say. His administration released a statement on the aerial assault of December 29th. On that night, he said Russia launched its largest aerial assault on Ukraine since the war began. This massive bombardment used drones and missiles, including missiles with hypersonic capabilities, to strike cities and civilian infrastructure all across Ukraine. Note that Russia says it did not target civilian infrastructure, and this is important and we'll get to why. Strikes reportedly hit a maternal a maternity hospital, a shopping mall, and residential areas, killing innocent people and injuring dozens more. It's a stark reminder to the world that nearly after 2 years of this devastating war, Putin's objectives remain unchanged. He seeks to obliterate Ukraine and subjugate its people. He must be stopped. And then there's bragging about these air defense systems, which obviously didn't do too well. But of course, the United States takes full credit, as well as NATO, its NATO partners take full credit for arming Ukraine in this way and urging Congress to take action. So no big surprises there, but Putin must be stopped, they said. Putin must be stopped. Well, here is what Russia had to say about this air defense question. And a lot of people would call you a Putin puppet or an agent of Russia for maybe agreeing with this position, but it's hard to disagree. And I'm going to show you why in a second. But according to Russia, when they were called to the United Nations by the backers of Kiev after this assault, Russia claimed that Ukraine is positioning its air defenses in residential areas. Sound familiar? Oftentimes, Hamas in Gaza is claimed to be using human shields. Well, essentially, what Russia has been arguing this entire time is that that's what Kiev has been doing. It's been positioning its air defenses in residential areas, and that's leading to civilian casualties when they malfunction. This is what permanent representative of the UN from Russia, Vasily Nebenzia, told the Security Council on Friday. Officials in Kiev have accused Moscow of killing 30 civilians and injuring at least 160 more in the 18-hour barrage of drones and missiles across the country earlier that day. There's only one solution. Russia must be deprived of its ability to produce weapons to finance its military aggression and to threaten the world. That's what Ukrainian envoy Sergei Kislitsa said. He went on to accuse Russia of rocket terrorism against civilians. Kislitsa was backed by the British representative who said that the death toll would have been greater if not for the work of its air defenses, Ukraine's air defenses. It's difficult to imagine greater cynicism. If not for the work of Ukrainian air defense, there would have been no civilian casualties. The Russian envoy said there are numerous videos available online showing how Russian missiles and drones are striking military sites and depots, causing distinctive detonation, while Ukrainian anti-air raid missiles are missing their targets and veering off course and falling on residential buildings and other civilian sites. He argued that fragments of projectiles are causing damage in civilian areas only because Ukrainian air defense systems are posted there. During the meeting, which was broadcast live, Nebenzia held up a sheet of paper with a QR code linking to a video he said was proof of his claims. According to the transcript from the website of Russia's mission to the UN, the link leads to a video showing a burning projectile crashing into a high-rise building. I'm not going to play the video here for the censors, but essentially what you will see in that video is a residential building catching on fire, exploding from the top, and that's because a projectile hit, and it's quite likely, if not 100%, the truth that was a Ukrainian air defense system malfunctioning, misfiring, however you want to put it. So that's what Russia accuses Ukraine of. And I think it's important to take stock of Russia's position because while many might say in the collective West, especially the neocons, will say, how could you believe what Russia is saying? Of course they're going to say this. Of course they're going to use this argument because it justifies their aggression on Ukraine. Well, the facts say a completely different story. Back in September, the New York Times, this isn't RT, this isn't any kind of Russian media source. This is, first of all, it's being reported by the Business Insider because the New York Times article is very detailed, very long. This summarizes it very well, though. Business Insider said a missile strike back in September 2023 killed at least 15 people in a Ukrainian market, and it was blamed on Russia. There's growing evidence it was fired by Ukraine. A missile that hit Kostanaya Nivka in September was Ukrainian, a New York Times analysis said. Kiev had blamed the attack, which killed at least 15 people, on Russia. Data analyzed by the New York Times suggests it was an air defense missile that went off course. Does that sound familiar? I think it does. A missile that struck a busy market in East Ukraine was likely misfired by Ukraine and not the result of a Russian attack, said the New York Times analysis. The missile struck the town, which is close to where Russian and Ukrainian forces are battling in Bakhmut. So this was back in September during the Battle of Bakhmut, killing at least 15 and injuring around 30 people. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky blamed the attack on Russia, and the UN and Ukraine's Western allies condemned the strike. The Russian evil must be defeated, said Zelensky. He described the missile strike as a deliberate attack on a peaceful city. But a new analysis of missile fragments, satellite imagery, witness accounts, and social media posts suggests the incident was likely caused by a misfired air defense missile, said the New York Times. Analysts told the Times that problems with the missile's guidance systems or a fault with its tail fin can cause it to go accidentally off course. Russia has deliberately attacked civilian targets multiple times during the war, blah, 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 said Human Rights Watch. But back to the Times analysis, there are several pieces of evidence that this strike was a tragic Ukrainian error, they're saying. Tragic error, right? Whenever Ukraine kills civilians, it's an error. Whenever Russia is accused of killing civilians, it is evil. So the video footage and data from the impact site indicate it came from a territory to the northwest of the city controlled by Ukraine. 2 times reporters were in the village of Druzhkivka, 10 miles northwest of this city, and said that shortly after 2 p.m. on September 6, Ukraine launched 2 surface-to-air missiles. Several eyewitnesses backed the claim. A missile struck Kosyanivka at 2:04 p.m. Analysis of shrapnel damage at the impact site is consistent with the missile being a 9M38 launched by a Buk surface-to-air launch system of the kind used by Ukraine and Russia. It is not consistent with Kiev's claim. It was caused by an S-300 missile. So essentially, this has happened before. This has happened before. So all in all, Ukraine is being lauded, of course, as the victim. And they went to the UN Security Council with the help of their representatives there within NATO, the United States, the UK, France, etc., to try to make their case. Okay. But at the UN Security Council, I just want to read what the UN envoy, Vasily Nebenzia, had to say further. Okay. So he said that Ukraine does not and will not have the resources to achieve a breakthrough or preserve the current situation on the line of contact between the armies. The military plans of the regime in Kiev have ended in a complete fiasco. That is why you should anticipate bad news in the nearest future for yourself and your Ukrainian proxies. He was telling this directly to the collective West. The Russian envoy stated that additional military aid is only going to prolong the agony. A military victory over Russia is completely unattainable. It's an unattainable goal. Time is running out for the regime in Kiev. Its future is, in fact, under serious threat. At the same time, peaceful Ukrainians, the Ukrainian language, and Ukrainian culture are under no threat, no matter how hard the West is trying to prove the opposite. So Russia had very strong words for the United States, for the NATO backers of Kiev after this attack. And now this attack, of course, was met with retaliation. And while we know that the accusations against Russia here are incredibly suspect, because we know that Ukraine has blamed these attacks on Russia before. We know that Russia has actually been quite precise in demilitarizing not just Ukraine, but the entire collective West, and keeping civilian casualties at such a low point that Israel has already surpassed by many, many times over the civilian casualty numbers in Gaza that exist in Ukraine. The number of children, we're talking about 10, 15, 20 times more killed in Gaza than in Ukraine. Why? Because Russia has been incredibly measured, incredibly careful. It has done everything it can to keep this war from affecting ordinary people. But of course, Kiev has done the exact opposite, because since the beginning, this has been a war against the Russian people in what was once Eastern Ukraine and now Russia. So here we have, okay, the attack, this is from the Moscow Times, but it was really from the AFP. this report. On Saturday, the following day, this is as this is being recorded, December 30th, Kiev launched an atrocious campaign, committed massive atrocities in Volgograd, a border city to Ukraine and Russia. So Russia has accused Ukraine of carrying out a terrorist attack on civilians in the city of Volgograd, including using controversial cluster munitions in the strikes that killed at least 21 and wounded dozens more. Moscow said the attack, which followed waves of rocket and drone attacks by Russian forces in Ukrainian cities, would not go unpunished. In an emergency meeting at the UN Security Council demanded by Russian envoy Vasily Nebenzia, claimed that Kiev targeted a sports center, an ice rink, and a university. In order to increase the number of casualties of the terrorist attack, they used cluster munitions. It was a deliberate, indiscriminate attack against civilian targets. Both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine were due to give New Year's speeches on Sunday as the conflict approaches the second anniversary this coming February. The Volgograd attack came a day after the Ukraine set a barrage of missile strikes on several cities, killed at least 39 people, wounding dozens more. So Volgograd lies about 30 kilometers, 19 miles from the border of Ukraine, has been repeatedly struck by what Moscow says is indiscriminate shelling by Kiev's forces. And Russia said it's not going to go unpunished. So another crime, essentially. Another crime. And this has been happening repeatedly over and over and over again. Volgograd, these Russian border areas to Ukraine, have been attacked with U.S. and NATO weaponry and logistical support, right? People who are providing, we're talking about advisors. These advisors from the United States and NATO, Russia has accused over and over again of being directly involved in killing Russians, which has been a primary aim of this conflict from the very start. And it's just an absolute atrocity, right? Because according to Russia, children were killed in the attack on Volgograd. That at least 2 children were among the 14 people killed, and there were over 100 injured, said the emergency ministry of Russia. The barrage was first reported by regional governor Vyacheslav Gladkov, who said, citing preliminary data, that at least 2 casualties were children. On Telegram, the official said that the barrage hit the city center, located about 40 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, although he did not provide details on what weapons had been used. He added that the attack had hit a residential sector. Later, however, as the death toll continued to mount, the emergency ministry said that the Ukrainian attack had claimed the lives of 12 adults and 2 children. He noted that 108 people were injured, including 15 minors. So, children, that's who they're targeting. This is targeting. Even if Russia had struck Kiev and those other neighboring cities and areas and had killed civilians, no one could say that they were targeting the civilians, because Ukraine, as Russia has said and has been proven, they are literally stationing their air defense systems in residential areas, meaning that they are using Ukrainian people and Ukrainian infrastructure as human shields against Russia. And Russia has said, we're going to demilitarize Ukraine by any means necessary, which means it is on Ukraine to protect and prevent civilian casualties. Now, the fact of the matter is that Ukraine has done the exact opposite of that. Ukraine has killed their own people. That's what they did. And I am willing to bet, and there needs to be an investigation, because I can't put any evidence or facts behind this just yet, because this is such a new development. But if it's anything like what had happened in September with that groundbreaking New York Times analysis, who's to say that in another 3, 6, 9 months, we're not going to have another analysis saying, oops, it wasn't Russia at all. It is very likely that that is the case, that it was not Russia at all, that it was Ukraine's misfiring, their inability. What happens when you give untrained, unprepared, ill-prepared, unmotivated, and completely bankrupt forces this kind of weaponry, and they don't know how to use it? Well, they make mistakes. What happens when you give them that weaponry and you tell them, fire in the middle of residential areas? It might hit those residential areas. And I believe that's what happened here. So this is an absolute atrocity what happened in Belgorod and what happened in Kiev in the other areas of West Ukraine. What we are seeing, what we are seeing is absolute desperation from Ukraine's side, but really the entirety of its backers, the entirety of the Ukraine project, led, of course, by the United States. This is desperation. This is an attempt to create a crisis in order to push forward the conflict. But what Russia is doing, and I believe this wholeheartedly, Russia is laying the groundwork for showing Ukraine, showing Dana, showing the United States that this is what happens when you F around. You eventually you find out. And this war of attrition is about to get a lot more intense. Russia, there are rumors that there's going to be a winter offensive, that this is really just the first strike coming out of Russia's deep and heavy arsenal, prepared and ready to finish the job, to end this conflict on Russia's terms. That's what the initial attack that happened on Friday, December 29th was all about. And that is what Kiev is basically asking for to accelerate with their heinous attack on Belgorod. And this is only going to get this is only going to get worse and worse for Ukraine, because Ukraine is having a terrible end of 2023. Everything has shifted in this conflict. At the beginning of 2023, Ukraine was supposedly in the driver's seat. Mid 2022, late 2022, it was said to have captured all this territory. It was said to have been able to take control in Kharkov, in areas near it, and that its so-called offensive in the summer of 2022 was so successful that it was ready for another counteroffensive coming up in 2023 to essentially finish the job. And from the very beginning of 2023, it's been a process of rolling back that complete fallacy, rolling it back, dialing back the volume. The United States, NATO, Vilnius, we saw it in July of 2023. We saw when the counteroffensive started in June of 2023 that immediately the United States and NATO said, oh, wait, this is not going to go how we thought it was going to go. And why? Because it was Ukraine's third army, and it was not even close to being as equipped as it was during the February 2022 initial period, initial phase of the special military operation, or even during that so-called summer offensive of 2022. So this has been a terrible year. The counteroffensive was a massive failure. And now the entirety of the collective West is really looking for an exit ramp. And that's why, in response to this attack that Russia has ushered in and imposed upon Ukraine, Ukraine had to answer in a desperate and most vile and utterly disgusting way. They had to respond in a manner that's not going to help them one bit on the battlefield, but actually will probably accelerate its demise. So the end of Ukraine is near. These attacks, these atrocities, these intentional assaults on the Russian people will not be tolerated. And it's only a matter of time before Russia begins to accelerate this process of demilitarization of Ukraine and really end this conflict on its own terms. That's where we're headed. That's what winter 2024 is going to bring. And really, Ukraine is doomed. And the strikes on Kiev and surrounding areas of December 29th really made that point quite clear. All right, everybody. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to get to the next story very soon. Please hit the like button, hit that notifications bell. A lot of folks here tonight. Subscribe to the channel. Um, we're going to get into more so the terrible year for Ukraine in 2024. That's what we're going to get into now. All right. So hit that like button, hit that notifications bell, and we're going to get started. Okay. Hit that subscribe button. You can also support this channel in the video description, Patreon, Substack, and much more. All right. So here we go. 2023 was indeed a nightmare for Ukraine, and 2024 is looking no better. So, 2023, of course, started out with all kinds of optimism from NATO and the collective West, the United States at the lead, talking about how Russia's impending defeat at the hands of Ukraine's military was going to occur in a magnificent counteroffensive that would launch at any point. And then we got months and months and literally months. We got nearly 6 months of hype about a coming counteroffensive that NATO, the United States were preparing Ukraine for, and that this was going to be the straw that broke the Russian camel's back. Well, we are now at the end of 2023, entering 2024, and the United States is now in a completely different position. The Biden administration says Politico is quietly shifting its strategy in Ukraine. For 2 years, Biden and Zelensky have focused on driving Russia from Ukraine. Now Washington is discussing a move to a more defensive posture. All that means is that Ukraine has lost. Ukraine has not achieved any of its objectives that the US and NATO attempted to arm it to the teeth to achieve, and that Ukraine has lost. So, with US and European aid to Ukraine now in serious jeopardy, the Biden administration and European officials are quietly shifting their focus from supporting Ukraine's goals of total victory over Russia to improving its position in an eventual negotiation to end the war, according to a Biden administration official and a European diplomat based in Washington. Such a negotiation would likely mean giving up parts of Ukraine to Russia. The White House and Pentagon publicly insist there's no official change to administration policy, that they still support Ukraine's aim of forcing Russia's military completely out of the country. But along with the Ukrainians themselves, US and European officials are now discussing the redeployment of Kiev's forces away from Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky's mostly failed counteroffensive into a stronger defensive position against Russian forces in the east, according to the administration official and the European diplomat, and confirmed by a senior administration official. Essentially, a lot of anonymous officials, usually meaning intelligence, usually meaning those who have an inside scoop. And when it comes to, usually when I see this, I say, okay, well, we should be suspicious. But when it comes to projects that are within the purview of their agenda and their strategic military and intelligence strategy, when it comes to points, talking points, positions, political situations that are very much in the purview of intelligence and of the so-called anonymous officials, I think we should believe them when it comes to Ukraine. This effort has also involved bolstering air defense systems and building fortifications, razor wire obstructions, and anti-tank obstacles and ditches along Ukraine's northern border with Belarus. In addition, the Biden administration is focused on rapidly resurrecting Ukraine's own defense industry to supply desperately needed weapons that U.S. Congress is balking at replacing. So that's what Politico is saying, that the strategy is now pull back, withdraw, go on the defensive, prolong the conflict without any prospect of victory. That is a very different position than what Ukraine was touted to be in just at the beginning of 2023. So essentially, we've seen a complete 180 here. And this can be even spelled out in simpler terms. So Kit Clarenberg of the Gray Zone posted this on Twitter, and I think it is a really interesting summation. So Richard Kemp, he's a retired UK Royal Navy admiral, I believe. I believe he was very high up. Mr. Kemp, he has been writing for, no, he was a colonel. So he was a colonel. He's a British Army officer. So he was a retired British Army officer, and he's been writing a lot in the Financial Times about Ukraine. And so here you can see, let me see actually if I can zoom in on this a bit. Here you can see how the headlines from February 2023 to December 2023 have changed quite a bit. So in February 2023, a total Russian collapse is surprisingly close because Ukraine can retake Crimea and bring about the total implosion of Putin's forces, but only with our support, essentially saying that victory is actually within reach for Ukraine. And then Putin is terrified of Ukraine's counteroffensive back in May, right before it began. And of course, February to May, that's over 3 months of hype now before it started. Airstrikes on Kiev were an attempt to undermine morale. Instead, they have strengthened it. July 3rd, 2023, Russia's time has almost run out. This is during Ukraine's counteroffensive. Ukraine's offensive disappoints, but the Kremlin's strategy of wearing down Kiev is no longer tenable. So here you see the spin in the headlines here that this is a disappointing counteroffensive, but it is no longer tenable for Russia to wear down Ukraine. But if we look at this, it says Ukraine's offensive disappoints. So already they were talking about this being a disappointment in July 2023, the counteroffensive. And then what happened? 90,000 Ukrainians died, a huge percentage, 30, 40 plus percent of all of Ukraine's weaponry wiped out in a matter of months. And of course, now the desperation has set in deeply. Ukraine is losing on December 28, 2023, but the UK must stand by it. So Ukraine is losing now, facing wars in Europe and the Middle East. Does the West have the will to back the right side? So Kit Clarenberg said, that's a farce in 4 acts. And the most infamous, I think, image of what 2023 represented for Ukraine was summarized by Max Blumenthal, editor-in-chief of the Gray Zone. Zelensky heeded NATO's demand to break negotiation and dispatch masses of Ukrainian men onto a killing field to satisfy neocon fever dreams of bludgeoning and balkanizing Russia into oblivion. But in Vilnius, this was the NATO summit in Lithuania, back in the summer of 2023, all he got was a pat on the back and some lousy cluster bombs. You're stuck with us, Biden told him after rejecting his application to the club. Sad. And so this is the image that shook the world. Of course, he didn't have a mop, literally, but the mop has been added for good effect because essentially what he's doing is the dirty work of NATO and the United States, and he was rejected. He was not spoken to. He went there in his army fatigues, and he was essentially shunned by the very people who propped him up to fight this war. There is no image that says defeat bigger than this one. This is the image that summarizes Ukraine's destruction at the hands of NATO. And this ultimately summarizes and puts a highlight on how Zelensky now entering 2024 is a marked man. There is no guarantee that Zelensky will make it out of 2024 as the leader of Ukraine, as the president of Ukraine, whether it's by election or by being taken out or whisked away or escape, run away, whatever he's got to do. He does not have a lot of time because the rumors, the rumblings, and the growing evidence of a possible coup or some kind of power shift is going to occur soon. So Ukraine has had a terrible year because the United States and NATO wanted to keep Ukraine in the fight, wanted to destroy Ukraine in order to fight Russia. And that ended in failure. So, really, Ukraine's failure is the US and NATO's failure. They have sacrificed everything, they've demilitarized themselves. And they still have China supposedly to worry about. This is what they claim, that they need to contain China and they need to build up against China. Now they're stuck in another conflict in West Asia due to Israel's unhinged onslaught in Gaza, threatening regional war. The Red Sea is on fire because Yemen is taking a heroic stand for the people of Gaza, the Palestinian people. So the United States has a lot of problems, and Ukraine is its biggest one right now because Ukraine was supposed to be the domino that led to the ultimate collapse of Russia. And it has been far from that. That is not how this game of dominoes ended up. In fact, it's been the exact opposite. So now I'm going to play a friend of the show, Scott Ritter, a frequent guest. You can follow him at scottritterextra.com. He is in Moscow at the moment. So I'm going to play a 2-minute topic that he just did, summarizing, I think, quite well the bad year for Ukraine, hitting on these points. I think it's quite important to hear this summary because it goes over everything. And then I'm going to get into how Ukraine's bad year has actually been a geopolitical nightmare of broad proportions for the United States and its hegemonic ambition. So here we go.
This has not been a good year. Ukraine in crisis. This has not been a good year for Ukraine. It started off with the much hyped counteroffensive, where Ukraine was provided tens of billions of dollars of modern NATO equipment and given training on this equipment and assisted in planning military operations designed to break the Russian defenses, split the Russian defenses, sever the land bridge connecting Crimea with the main part of Russia. None of that happened. The Russian defenses held, and the Ukrainian forces, which had been so carefully assembled, were destroyed on the battlefield. Now Ukraine finds itself in a situation where it is not only facing continued military defeat on the battlefield, but they're losing support of the very nations whose support they need to continue the fight. The European Union has grown weary of the Ukraine conflict, questioning the need to expend tens of billions of euros in support of what appears to be a losing. The United States Congress is mired in domestic political intrigue, where you continued Ukrainian funding and held hostage to domestic issues such as border security of on the southern border with Mexico. Right now, Ukraine is starving in terms of resources. They aren't getting new equipment. They're not getting the money necessary to continue funding government operations, and they've run out of manpower. Ukraine is right now in the midst of an emergency 500,000 strong mobilization that includes women, old men, disabled people, and frankly speaking, people that don't want to fight and die for Ukraine. 2023 was not a good year for Ukraine. It was, however, a good year for Russia. Russia has gone over from the defensive to the offensive. They recently have captured Mariinka, a city where Ukraine used heavily fortified positions as a base to shell innocent civilians in the Donbass. They won't be able to do that anymore. Russia is on the verge of capturing Advika, another heavily fortified town, and so on and so forth, up and down the line of contact. The Russian forces have gone over the offensive. These Russian forces are well equipped, well led, and there doesn't seem to be any end to them, as over 1,500 Russians are volunteering to serve in the special military operation every day. 2024 looks to be even worse for Ukraine, with the potential of strategic defeat. 2024 will be a good year for Russia. This has been my 2-minute topic. Remember.
So there you have it. That about summarizes it all. But it's important to know what Scott mentioned there that I was not able to know, which is that Russia has been making gains on the battlefield, real gains. Marinka, Avdiivka is increasingly becoming surrounded. So even on the front line, even if it is slow, it's a war of attrition. Russia still has the initiative, and it's looking like that increasingly. And this missile attack that occurred on December 29th, this barrage, this assault, is absolutely an indication that Russia has a lot more firepower. This is not something that Ukraine can do. Ukraine can go over the border 40, 50, 60 kilometers and kill Russians because it just has that thirst to do so and still has some weaponry to do so. But what Russia did on December 29th was a strategic military operation, one that is massively effective. It has been massively affected over the course of this conflict. Russia has degraded Ukraine's military once, twice, 3 times over, and it's about to be a fourth. And this one is probably the final one. As Scott mentioned, there is nothing left for the United States and NATO to give. They are indicating, they are telling Zelensky, they are telling Ukraine, they're telling everybody, they're telling the Western public and the collective West that there's nothing left, that this war is over. You have Politico reporting that the United States is trying to seek an exit ramp of some kind and to force a negotiated settlement. Now, Russia has no reason to do any of this, and that is why I believe this conflict will continue for quite some time. And the ramifications of the bad year for Ukraine and the good year for Russia is enormous. They are enormous. It's not just that Russia is winning on the battlefield and that it is much more equipped than Ukraine, that it has essentially demilitarized NATO and the United States and has found itself in probably the most favorable position you could be given the balance of forces in the world. But the ramifications are even bigger. They're bigger for the economic situation around the world, the geopolitical situation around the world have all been changed dramatically because of this conflict. Ukraine's bad year has opened up the floodgates for the entirety of those outside of the collective West, what's known sometimes as the global South, to move away from the United States, to move away from NATO, to move away from their economic reliance on the dollar, to move toward a multipolar world. That is what Ukraine has taught much of the world. It has even taught staunch allies of the United States and of NATO proper, such as Saudi Arabia. This is a country, Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which has done its utmost to be loyal, at least up until the Biden administration, to the United States in much, or if not all, of its prior ventures. Now that relationship is strained, and even Saudi Arabia has championed BRICS, has joined BRICS, has normalized with Iran, brokered by China, and has been very keen on building stronger relations with Russia. The entirety of West Asia has looked at Ukraine as a possible crystal ball for what could happen to countries, even the Saudi Arabias, the UAEs of the world. What could happen to them if they end up on the United States' bad side? So this has changed the world in such a dramatic fashion. Russia's rise on the world stage is now not only inevitable, but it has been cemented. Russia can now go down in the history books as the country that demilitarized NATO, that defeated Western sanctions in the biggest way, not just being able to survive. Many countries have done that. Iran has done that. Little Eritrea, which we cannot negate as significant on the African continent, Zimbabwe. These countries have survived. Venezuela, they've survived. Sometimes they've done better than survive. But Russia has actually defeated them, meaning that Russia's better off than it was before the sanctions. Few countries can say that. And so that has grown Russia's prestige, its leadership in the world by many folds. Russia is now not just a rising power, but it is a global power in the world. In history books will look at Russia and say, at least those that are written not by the hegemonic victors, or we should say losers at this point, but by the people who have become victorious over them. Those who are sober in their analysis will say Russia defeated the empire. Russia defeated the United States and NATO in 2023. So Russia's good year, Russia's good 2023 was in fact even more momentous than what than even what Scott said. And Scott was very sober in his analysis there. But yes, it's even bigger than this. Russia will lead BRICS in 2024. We're going to see possibly another 10 countries join that alliance. We're going to see Russia and China and those countries in BRICS and other multilateral organizations continue to build alternatives to the US dollar, build alternatives to US economic strangulation and sanctions. We're going to see Russia continue to consolidate politically to the point where we know Vladimir Putin is running in for president, is a shoo-in, but we're going to see Russia's political trajectory continue to move toward a multipolar centric way of leadership globally, but also it will have huge ramifications for Russia domestically, as we have seen with its reorienting of the economy during this sanctions regime by the West. Russia is now focusing on developing itself and becoming more self-reliant. That is going to continue. And when a country that big is increasingly self-reliant, it opens up opportunities for more countries around the world to do the same. That is why Russia and China are such an important partnership. The $200 billion relationship between Russia and China is massive and huge. But at the same time, China and Vietnam's relationship is nearly $200 billion in total trade volume. But we wouldn't say China and Vietnam's, well, very significant, and of course, holding a lot of political and economic weight, is as important as China and Russia's, because China and Russia are global powers. China and Russia have done what few countries have been able to do in the 21st century, which is come out of squalor, come out of warmongering and the attempt to undermine them from the hegemon, come out of that victorious. Few countries can say they can do that and do it in a way where now they are propelled to a position of global leadership. So Russia's good year, Ukraine's bad year, is just massively important for the future of the world. Really, Russia is charting a course forward that has not been seen in a century. This is what Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin said to each other. Xi Jinping, when he visited Moscow in March of 2023, he said, "We are witnessing changes not seen in a century." When Xi Jinping said that, he was talking about we haven't seen this since essentially the emergence of the Soviet Union and, of course, the world socialist bloc that ushered in the Cold War and ushered in massive changes to the entire world order, independence movements, etc. That's what he was really referring to. That's what happened a century ago. It led to world wars. It led to a complete reorienting of the world economy and the world and the way that the world was governed. This is happening again now, and the ramifications are possibly even larger because the United States and its partners in crime have a plan, or I don't know if we can call it a plan, but they have the aim to try to contain and eventually wage war against both Russia and China. But what Ukraine has shown us is that this war has failed before it started. Ukraine is a reflection of the internal rot of the US hegemonic unipolar order, that it is rotting internally. These divisions about Ukraine aid is just another example of how it is rotting internally. Its foreign policy has suffered defeat after defeat after defeat. Afghanistan being a recent one, now Ukraine, but we can go on and on even before this that would give us some indication, even Vietnam. We can go all the way back to Vietnam, to Korea, major defeats, major setbacks, even during the US's so-called golden era of hegemony. We can go on and on. None of these conflicts have led to concrete victory. And now, with each defeat, with each setback that comes in subsequent conflicts, we see the retreat, we see the rot accelerate. And Ukraine really pushed on that acceleration pedal harder than ever before. Now we are seeing the United States and NATO demilitarize themselves, disarm themselves, weaken themselves, pour everything into a losing effort, show their hand as megalomaniacal warmongers with only one aim, and that's to divide up, to balkanize, to destroy the world so they can control it, so they can loot and steal and plunder and cheat and lie and enrich the tiny few. The world is sick of it and is not having it. And with the entrance of the atrocities, the crimes against humanity being committed in Gaza by another U.S. proxy, Israel, we are seeing just a momentous shift of world public opinion against the United States and its NATO allies and whoever else decides to, the very small number of countries that decide to follow its lead. We are seeing a massive shift away from them, even in the collective West, whether it's from war fatigue or whether it is from outright disdain and distrust of the political system that has led them into these wars. We're going to see a crisis, a crumbling of this world order. Ukraine in 2024 is going to reflect that deeply because while the battlefield will go slow, Russia is not here to wipe Ukraine off of the map, although the demilitarization of Ukraine is going to move forward steadily and handedly. And indeed, a winter offensive is very likely. But it will be the political rot. Ukraine will crumble from the inside because the coup that established this government in 2014, the rapid militarization and buildup to a war with Russia facilitated by the US and NATO, created the conditions for Ukraine's leadership to essentially be nothing more than an instrument, a puppet of NATO's aims. And any government that is a puppet of a foreign government or entity's aims is not going to be one that lasts very long when things start to go awry. And boy, have they gone awry. This thing is over. There is nothing left for Ukraine to achieve. There is nothing left for the collective West to do but to watch their project continue to rot from the inside and out. And in 2024, we're going to see that, and we're going to see how the globe, how the world is charting a new course forward. And so, for all of the atrocities, for all of the ways in which Ukraine has exposed the cruelty and depravity of the US and Kiev's US and NATO backers, it has also exposed that there is more than one way to go to move forward in terms of building a world worth living in. And Russia and its allies and those in the global south are showing the way forward. And Ukraine is just going to push that development, push all of that forward. So I guess in some ways, we can thank the United States, we can thank NATO, we can thank Kiev, we can thank all the forces that are trying to push through a war against Russia via this conflict. We can thank them for the processes that they are lighting a flame in. And we thus have something to celebrate going into 2024. All right, everybody. We're moving through these stories quite quickly, which I'm glad about. Before I get to the next story, though, let me actually go to an announcement. All right. So not directly after this stream, but not too long after this stream, 1 a.m. Eastern, very late, but DD Geopolitics is having a stream from the Aussie Cossack show. It's going to be a New Year's Eve special. I'll be on with Sarah from DD Geopolitics. I'm going to put this link in the chat now, and I'm also going to put it in the video description now as well, and I'll let you know when it is there. So I want you to come to this after this stream, set your notification, so we can have a great live stream there and continue the conversation. Okay, so it is there now in 3, 2, 1. It's in the video description. So be sure to save your place here. We're going to have a great show going over all the most interesting and eventful events. We're going to go into all of the geopolitical developments that are worth noting in 2023. And of course, prospects for 2024. Look at that thumbnail. I mean, the person who helps me with my thumbnails also does the thumbnails for DD Geopolitics as their first role. And so, I mean, it's a great thumbnail. It's a great thumbnail. So be sure to save your place. Hit that notification bell. You see, notify me. I'll put it right here. Notify me. Just hit that. The notification turns on, and then when the stream comes to the beginning or when it's about to happen, you can watch it. Okay. So I put it in the live chat as well. Okay. So the live chat now also has the link, and it's in the video description. So do tune in. It's going to be a very good time. I'll announce it at the end as well. Those are good friends over there. They do a lot of good work on global developments, and they've definitely helped me on Telegram, which hint, hint, go to the video description and follow me on Telegram. But they've helped me get off the ground because Telegram is a completely new world for me. And so they've been a big help supporting my work. And so I do have to give them props. And of course, plug their stuff whenever I can. All right. So hit the like while you're at it. Okay. Here we have one more story to go. Then we'll have a little bit of time, I think, to relax, to kind of talk more casually. But we have one more story. Okay. And it has to do with China. I do like to cover China on almost every stream. And so it's really important, although it doesn't make the headlines as much anymore because there's this myth and rumor that China and the U.S. are somehow, or at least there have been developments that might indicate that China and the U.S. are cooling off, thawing. Nothing could be further from the truth. And so it's important to cover developments regarding China because the United States is waiting in the wings to escalate there. We need to be prepared at all times to counter the absolute complete and total propaganda that we are fed about it. All right. So we are going to get started with the last story, and then we'll have some time to do some questions, some New Year's reflections, all of that good stuff. So here we go. What China is doing is a complete shock to the United States. And what am I referring to? I am referring to new reports from U.S. intelligence themselves, of course, to the Western mainstream media, indicating that China has defeated the U.S.'s spy network. Now, you all may remember in October 2021, William Burns, the CIA director under the Biden administration, had announced that it was going to shift its focus away from endeavors in the Middle East and other parts of the world and focus on China or reopen mission centers and the like in order to rebuild its failed capacity. Well, 2 years later, and the United States is still talking about its inability to spy on China. And this is driving the neocons absolutely mad. So here's the Wall Street Journal. This is one of their biggest stories of the year of 2023. And it's to end the year. It says American spies confront a new formidable China. The CIA's lost network of agents a decade ago and has struggled to build or rebuild in the surveillance state America calls its top priority. No real insight into leadership plans. So the CIA lost network of agents a decade ago and has struggled to, wow, this is bad grammar, to rebuild in the surveillance state America calls its top security priority. No real insight into leadership plans. So Washington, Beijing's spy catchers all but blinded the U.S. and China a decade ago when they systematically rounded up a network of Chinese agents working for the CIA. As many as 24 assets providing information to the U.S. were executed or imprisoned, among them high-ranking Chinese officials. The CIA is still struggling to rebuild its human espionage capabilities in China, the agency's top intelligence target, according to interviews with current and former U.S. officials. The gaps leave the U.S. with limited understanding of secret deliberations among Chinese leader Xi Jinping and his inner circle on key security issues such as Taiwan and other topics. We have no real insight into leadership plans and intentions in China at all, said a former senior intelligence official who had recently read classified reporting. Strengthening the human spy network targeted on China is one goal of a titanic but mostly secret shift at the CIA and its sister U.S. spy agencies. It comes as a larger transformation in U.S. security policy away from fighting insurgencies around the world and toward preparing for a possible great power conflict with China and Russia. There you have it, admitting wholeheartedly that they are preparing for a conflict with Russia and China now and are moving away from insurgencies. What does that mean? Moving away from the Middle East, from terrorism, the war on terrorism. It's no longer about intelligence for the purposes of fighting so-called terrorism, which really was arming, backing terrorism in order to overthrow governments the U.S. didn't like in West Asia. So after 2 decades of supposedly hunting terrorists, $100 billion a year intelligence community is retraining personnel, redirecting billions in budgets, and retooling expensive spy machinery to focus on those potential adversaries. The pivot has not been simple. Hamas's surprise October 7th attack on Israel and the ensuing war in Gaza and the Russian invasion of Ukraine have demanded White House attention and intelligence resources, complicating CIA Director William Burns' drive to ensure China is the long-term top priority. One agency veteran said that handling the two crises while keeping a sustained focus on Beijing will test the agency's agility. And there you see Mr. William Burns not looking too happy about the way things are going. The U.S., which ceded responsibility for monitoring Palestinian militants in Israel in the years following the September 2001 terrorist attacks, and like Israel was blindsided by Hamas's assault, has redirected some intelligence resources to the Palestinian conflict in recent weeks, officials said. It isn't publicly known how substantial they are. The unexpected clash shows how difficult it can be with finite spying resources to get the balance right. The reality is that you don't have collection resources that you can exploit all over the world, said one counterterrorism official. China, which the Biden administration has named the greatest danger to American security, remains at the top of the CIA's to-do list, said Burns to the Wall Street Journal. We are approaching the People's Republic of China as a global priority, more than doubling the budget of resources devoted to China's mission over the past 3 years, and establishing the China Mission Center as the CIA's only single country mission center to coordinate the full agency's efforts on this issue. Even as we are balancing multiple priorities, including ongoing conflicts, we remain intensely engaged in the strategic long-term challenge posed by the PRC, by China. So what the CIA is saying is, we're not doing too good at this. The Wall Street Journal has blown the lid off of something that has been known and has been talked about in prior Western mainstream media reports, but it's coming out now with interesting timing because I think what's happening is the United States' intelligence apparatus and its military strategic policymakers, those who basically make war, they are concerned that there is not sufficient focus on China at the moment when the U.S. is bogged down in West Asia and Ukraine because of Gaza and because of the failed Ukraine project. This is becoming quite evident that they are becoming bogged down and cannot effectively focus on China. And so, in a previously undisclosed mission, Burns traveled to Japan and South Korea during the Hamas attacks, said a CIA official following a publicly reported trip to Beijing in May. Even as the Middle East and Afghanistan dominated resources and attentions in the years of 9/11, U.S. intelligence agencies never stopped targeting China aggressively, according to former officials directly involved in those efforts. This intelligence focus intensified in the mid 2000s, they said, but the entire U.S. government didn't make China a priority for at least another decade. So, this is what's interesting is while they're admitting that they have failed dramatically on the question of spying on China and being able to undermine China, not only have they failed dramatically, but they refuse to acknowledge how China was able to uncover their spy network and essentially end the US's capacity to spy on China. That to me is the story that is the most interesting and probably the most shocking part of what's going on here is not the US focusing on China, which this article has and this report has focused on in great detail, but it is the fact that China has completely blown the lid off of the invincibility that the United States' intelligence apparatus likes to project around the world. They like to project the image that they can just do whatever they want, whenever they want, right? When Elon Musk said we can coup whoever we want, he was talking about, of course, in reference to lithium in Bolivia, but really what he was talking about was a longstanding trend of the CIA and U.S. intelligence being very deeply involved in covert efforts to conduct regime change and to destabilize countries and regions of the world that were very valuable to corporate interests like those that Musk represents. So they haven't been able to do that to China in a very long time. There has been no capacity to undermine China's political leadership. Today, U.S. spy satellites closely monitor China's military deployments and modernization plans, while cyber and eavesdropping tools scoop up vast swaths of Chinese communications. Beyond that, U.S. knowledge of Xi's plans comes mostly from interference and from parsing his frequent public statements. So, not interference. Beyond that, U.S. knowledge of Xi's plans comes mostly from inference and from parsing public statements. What does that mean? It means they have no inner access to Xi Jinping. There's no one around the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, no one in the Politburo, no one helping the United States. There's no one even directly underneath those folks in the Communist Party of China that are working at the behest or even working as double agents, what have you, for the United States. Basically, what that means is that the United States can do nothing but read public statements like you and me do when we are trying to find out what Xi Jinping has said and what he is talking about, what he is planning to do as the Chinese president. We are doing the same thing that CIA analysts are doing right now in Biden's administration. That is how weak the United States has become. China is a much tougher intelligence target than it was a decade ago when agents were lost. Xi's security first state employs Orwellian surveillance systems that vastly complicate spy operations inside the country. And U.S. intelligence must track China's progress in fields as disparate as in artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. The two countries have clashed over American technology restrictions, military maneuvers at sea and in the skies, and of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. China's weaknesses, notably slowing economic growth and a shrinking population, are another wild card in assessing its future course. So this is what they always do. They basically say, we have no capacity. We're reading statements from Xi Jinping. China destroyed our network. But guess what? China is also collapsing. So maybe there's some hope here. No. China has put the lid on any of that. All of this is complete and utter horse, you know what. It is garbage. What the U.S. intelligence apparatus is trying to feed us is false hope for an aim that we should have no attachment or hope over. None of us should care that about the U.S. intelligence's aims around China or the Pentagon largely and the Defense Department and the U.S. military apparatus at large. We shouldn't care about what they do or what they think about China because we know that their aims are nefarious. They are trying to destroy really what is at the moment the world's best hope for prosperity. That is China. The world's best hope to prosper because China has the tools, it has the growth, it has the development, it has the manufacturing base, and it has an economic model and a diplomatic model that allows for the majority of the world to take advantage and to cooperate and collaborate. Unfortunately, China's goals and objectives are so vast that it's really difficult to say that we're doing a great job, says House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Turner said in an interview. In the early 2000s, CIA analysts began warning frequently about China's economic growth and military ambitions, former U.S. officials said. Collectively, this stream of classified intelligence reports became known among government insiders as the Scary China Brief. So, Scary China Brief. This is how serious these folks are. Secret reports sent to the White House, State Department, and other agencies charted the planned modernization of the People's Liberation Army, China's coming naval expansion, and Beijing's goal for overseas bases. The CIA leveraged endemic corruption in the upper reaches of the Communist Party and government ministries to recruit dozens of officials as paid agents, former officials familiar with the event said. But in a catastrophic setback, this network was obliterated as China caught the traitors in the midst one by one. A flaw in the CIA's covert communications with its agents exploited by Beijing is a suspected cause of the compromise. The details of what went wrong aren't publicly known, and it is unclear if anyone at the agency was held accountable. Horrendous, 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 a former U.S. official said of the losses in China, and I have doubts about whether there's been much recovery since then. The agent roll-up had profound effects. It occurred just as Xi was being groomed for power. Shock at the depth of the CIA penetration helped shape the Chinese leaders' overarching emphasis on security and loyalty, said another U.S. intelligence official. It also, at least for a time, chilled the agency's efforts to recruit foreigners worldwide. The feeling was, why would I take a call from the U.S. from a U.S. person? I know that Chinese people got bullets in the back of their head. The U.S. lost its human network in China just as Xi became Communist Party leader in late 2012 and then president a few months later. Multiple, sometimes daily CIA reports predicted he would be a different kind of Chinese leader, more forceful, nationalistic, and security-focused, current and former intelligence officials said. Several officials said the analysis was largely ignored by President Barack Obama's White House, which hoped that China grew economically, it would liberalize and join the U.S.-led international order. This is false. That policy had been followed by Democratic Republican administration for 2 decades. There was a lot of desperation to believe that, said a former CIA analyst of East Asia. So this was a disaster, okay? And we don't have to, this is a long story. We don't have to go over the whole thing because it's a long story of what happened. But we know that the primary message here, okay, and I'm going to show you. So the primary message here is that the CIA is trying to confront a new formidable China and has not been able to recover what they lost in 2012. Now, when former U.S. officials, U.S. intelligence say that this loss emboldened China and Xi Jinping to talk a certain way and to lead a certain way, well, of course it does. How would you feel if you were being spied on and you were being undermined? And what is the CIA's goal? Is it to help China? No, it is to destabilize China. It is to make China weaker. So if you catch the CIA in the act, you destroy its ability to spy, well, of course, you're going to focus on security. Of course, you're going to focus on sovereignty. And of course, you're going to build the tools and employ the tools to make sure that this doesn't happen again. That is not out of the ordinary. That is not some scary China story, as the CIA had put it in their so-called classified documents of their conversations about China over the years following the end of the Soviet Union. That is simply just basics, okay? And so the New York Times also reported on this too, and I'm just going to show you. This is they released this story around the same time to end 2023. Chinese spy agency rising to the challenge of the CIA. The ambitious Ministry of State Security is deploying AI and other advanced technology to go toe-to-toe with the United States, even as the two nations try to pilfer secrets. And this article talks about how China's ability to use advanced technologies is at the heart of how they're able to defend themselves from U.S. subversion. And that is what is so shocking about all of this, is that one of the biggest reasons why China is able to do this is not just the fact that it has a pretty disciplined, powerful, and popular political party leading the way and keeping the best interests of China in mind. And it is disciplined to do that. It's not only because of the Communist Party of China's fierce discipline in this way, but it's also because China has completely and utterly destroyed U.S. attempts to undermine its economy, especially the high-tech sector. So if you can deploy high-tech, advanced artificial intelligence, robotics, etc., all of the latest telecommunications, and you can move ahead of the United States. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute has already said that China leads in 37 of the 44, leads the United States in 37 of the 44 high technology sectors in the world. If China has that advantage, then China has the ability to deploy those in ways the United States cannot even fathom because it doesn't have access to them, not even the most powerful sectors of its national security state, like the intelligence apparatus. So, in effect, what we are talking about is a total obliteration of U.S. plans to undermine China, because if the U.S. doesn't have intelligence to undermine China, then the U.S. really doesn't have much at all. Because, and here's Bloomberg. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. Bloomberg talked about recently to end the year how Huawei sales were near 100 billion to end 2023. Surprise breakthrough, they say. The Chinese national champion sales bounced back this year. Huawei made its mark with chip advances in turbulent 2023. So I'm just going to read a bit of this to show how the advances in 2023 for China were so critical in the realm of the economy that it has assisted its ability to defend itself from being undermined by the United States covertly and overtly. And I'm going to show you why later. So Huawei Technology Co.'s company's revenue surged 9% in 2023, capping a dramatic year for a Chinese technology powerhouse that challenged Apple Inc. and U.S. sanctions with a surprise breakthrough in chip technology. Sales jumped by more than 700 billion yuan, or 98.7 billion US dollars, their fastest pace of growth in years, thanks to a resurgent smartphone business and robust 5G equipment sales. On a quarterly basis, revenue climbed 27% to at least 243 billion yuan, based on Bloomberg's calculations off the annual figure. That's a sharp acceleration from the third quarter's slight rise. Huawei made a splash in 2023 after releasing a smartphone with a sophisticated made-in-China 7-nanometer Kirin processor, celebrated across the country over U.S. restrictions intended to hobble the country's tech industry. The revelation ignited debate in Washington over whether those curbs had failed and what more needed to be done. Huawei, written off as a smartphone player after the U.S. cut it off from overseas suppliers in 2019, is mounting a comeback. The Shenzhen-based conglomerate has emerged as a symbol of China's resolve to thwart its geopolitical rivals' curbs, but Huawei itself warned of the dangers Washington and a volatile global economy will pose. So all Ken Hu, who's one of the executives who rotate in the chairman's role, says that there's changes in the business environment not caused by geopolitical conflict, but economic cycles which need to be watched out for. But nonetheless, those are impressive gains. Huawei has enjoyed strong support domestically since its 2019 blacklisting. State-owned telecom carriers awarded Huawei lucrative deals in 5G into cloud computing, and other institutions bought from the company. The Huawei Mate 60 Pro, the gadget housing the 7-nanometer Kirin chip, has taken market share away from Apple's iPhone 15 since its August launch, and Huawei has morphed into a major player in semiconductors, the very sector the Biden administration is focused on curtailing. Traditionally, Huawei has been a leader in networking equipment and smartphones, but it's establishing a network of chip plants and receiving $30 billion of funding from the government and its hometown of Shenzhen, according to the Semiconductor Industry Association. Into 2024, Huawei may have to contend with not just a persistent U.S. campaign to contain China, but also pressure to keep up its technological advances. Oh, boo-hoo for Huawei. I mean, Huawei's in the driver's seat, and now it has to worry about keeping up with expectations that have already been met as quite high. The last will come more difficult as already scarce critical components for chip making, such as equipment, become further strained. Gina Raimondo, Secretary of Commerce of the U.S., has said that she will try to take the strongest possible action to protect its national security when asked how she will respond to Huawei's breakthrough. To ensure its technological lead, Huawei aims to expand investment in emerging technologies such as AI. We need to proactively embrace the window of opportunity and invest our limited resources in the most critical strategic domains. Overall, our strategy direction is clear. We will continue to streamline headquarters, simplify management, and ensure consistent policy while making adjustments when needed. So this is a story that tells you all you need to know about where China is at right now and why the United States' national security apparatus is having such a hard time. And it all boils down to the fact that the Communist Party of China and the Chinese government that it leads is investing heavily in ensuring that companies like Huawei are successful. So when you have a government that is interested in investment, you can actually do some pretty big things. And that is what China is showing the world. And so with the development of the Huawei Mate 60 Pro, for example, what China is saying is we have the tools to circumvent the very infrastructure the United States has built to spy and wage war against us. So while 2023 was indeed a year where Russia defeated US sanctions, we can also say that 2023 was the year that China cemented its economic prowess to the point where it cannot be touched by the United States militarily. And what do I mean by this? Well, over the course of the years, we have had, especially since the pivot to Asia under Obama, the acceleration under Trump of a Cold War policy, and of course, the Biden administration's counterproductive acceleration and escalation of war of a conflict on China. We've had many different rounds of the United States playing at war and seeing whether it would be successful, with very mixed reviews from some of the most bloodthirsty and warmongering think tanks that exist in the United States. So what do I mean by this? So in 2016, the Rand Corporation probably had the most glowing assessment in 2016 about thinking through the unthinkable war with China. So of course, the Rand Corporation is directly related and connected and funded by the Defense Department. So here's what they had for key findings about what would happen if a war were to break out. And this is very glowing, somewhat, for the United States. Both sides would suffer losses. U.S. losses in 2015 would be a small fraction of forces committed, but still significant. Chinese losses would be much heavier, and U.S. losses in a substantial fraction of forces committed. So they would be much heavier for China. In 2015, if it were to happen in 2015, capabilities. But when Chinese capabilities improve by 2025, U.S. losses would range from significant to heavy, and Chinese losses, while heavy, could be somewhat less owing to increased degradation of U.S. strike capabilities. So Chinese capabilities will make it increasingly difficult for the United States to gain military. So this is a glowing report, but even they will say at the Rand Corporation, they will have difficulty, the United States, in gaining military operational dominance and victory, even in a long war. So although war would harm both economies, damage to China's would be far worse, supposedly. This is 2016. Because much of the Western Pacific will become a war zone, China's trade in the region would decline substantially, supposedly. China's loss of seaborne energy supplies would be especially damaging. A long conflict could expose China to internal political divisions, speculation, and Japan's increased military activity in the region could have considerable influence on military operations. So this is the glowing report, and even they are saying at the Rand Corporation in 2016 that it would be quite a problematic venture. But now we can go to the coverage of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a State Department, U.S. government funded think tank, reported in the Air Forces magazine, Air and Space Forces magazine, about a simulation conducted in 2023. So this simulation offered a rare look at U.S.-China clash over Taiwan in the world of war gaming. So actually, this was a lot less glowing now that we're talking about 2023. The U.S. could take thousands of casualties, but in most cases would ultimately prevail. These were the conclusions drawn from a series of 24 war games run by the CSIS that assessed a scenario in which China attempted an amphibious invasion of Taiwan in 2026. So we're going to go to the results, okay? Because I don't want to read this whole thing. The 24 game iterations presented sobering findings: high attrition of forces on both sides, massive U.S. surface ship and aircraft losses, and quick exhaustion of long range precision guided munitions. Attack on U.S. forces based in Japan could quickly draw the Japanese into the conflict. In most scenarios, the U.S. Taiwan Japan alliance defeated a conventional amphibious invasion by China and maintained an autonomous Taiwan. However, this defense came at a high cost. The United States and its allies lost dozens of ships, hundreds of aircrafts, and thousands of its service members. Taiwan saw its economy devastated. Further, the high losses damaged the U.S.'s global position for many years. So that's the rub here, is that if you want to go to war with China, you are essentially saying, okay, you're trading in short-term, what really is major losses, but short-term victory, as it is seen or perceived here, for long-term defeat. That is what even the CSIS is saying here. So, all in all, this is all about preparing the United States for war with China. But even these war simulations conducted by very enthusiastic and optimistic observers and analysts at these major think tanks are saying the losses are going to be huge. And if we learned anything from Russia, from the Ukraine conflict, we learned anything at all, it is that the United States chronically underestimates those it calls its adversary. It cannot stop underestimating those they view as weaker than them. This is the American exceptionalist mindset, the hubris, the out and out, dare I say, racism, the arrogance, the belief that the people that you are targeting are not human beings and therefore have no chance against you. But last time I checked, China has destroyed the U.S.'s capabilities to spy on it. The U.S. intelligence is reading public statements from Xi Jinping in order to find out information about Xi Jinping. If that doesn't show you the U.S.'s ultimately weak position, I don't know what does. But then you look at the question of Taiwan and the CSIS war games. How does the United States stop China from blockading and surrounding Taiwan to the point where the economy is starved and the global economy is in shambles, and the United States cannot withstand that? China, though, has withstood many economic crises because it has a resilient economy and it is able to pour in state investment when it is needed to protect its industries. That's what it did during COVID. That's what it did during 2008. That's what it's doing now in the aftermath of this Ukraine conflict and the sanctions and the impact that it's had on the economy. China's economy surely is not growing as rapidly as it once did, but the collapse narrative has been proven false over and over again. And actually, China's economy is quite stable if its economic relations abroad are any indication, or the fact that China is having breakthroughs in innovation, in investments, in high technology, as the Bloomberg has reported. So who really is in the weak position now? When Nancy Pelosi in August of 2022 visited Taiwan, China uh, 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 went into high gear and surrounded the island. The same when Kevin McCarthy visited as well. High gear, Taiwan was surrounded. These military operations that China conducts in the region are no joke. And China has the largest navy in the world and has the highest technology in the world to deploy against the United States. To underestimate China is foolish to think. When the United States lost to this guy, to Vietnam, it lost to Vietnam. You know what they were fighting with in Vietnam? They were fighting with old Soviet weapons. They were fighting with meager Chinese weapons. And in many cases, they were fighting with no major weapons at all that were built by the Vietnamese themselves. Essentially, they were fighting one of the poorest people in the world, and they got their butts kicked. Afghanistan 2021, what happened? The United States got their butts kicked by one of the poorest people in the world. Now it's proxy Israel. Gaza is one of the most impoverished and destroyed, and it's just shameful what has been done to Gaza. But the Al-Qassam, the Palestinian resistance, they are kicking Israel's butts right now on the ground. Why? Because they have the initiative, they have the motivation, they have they have nothing to lose but their freedoms. China has nothing to lose but its sovereignty because it has already built what it needs to be self-reliant. And guess what? China is the most popular country in the world when it comes to economic cooperation and investment. China has deep relations with the vast majority of the world's nations and countries, including the United States. So to think that China doesn't have leverage in an impending conflict with the United States is to be utterly ignorant and just in complete denial of the realities that are facing the declining United States-led unipolar order. That will be the folly and the mistake of the empire when it is all said and done in the final analysis. And China's ability to wipe out the US's spy network should not only shock those who have just learned about this, but it should also be a sobering lesson into what happens when you mess around. You eventually find out. When you mess around, when you try to go beyond your means as an entity that never really had legitimacy at all to rule over the world based on your model of degradation, deprivation, and exploitation, that eventually that model, that system will reach its limits. And China is the biggest example of what happens when that system reaches its limits. Something else arises. A new world is born, and China is at the head of it. And China will not be losing any war with the United States if it is ever fought. In this day and age, it is seemingly unlikely that the United States could even begin towing that line at this moment, given that it can't even get out of much smaller and arguably militarily more insignificant quagmires like Gaza and even Ukraine, which is a massive military assault, a massive military campaign. But even that really does pale in comparison to what would happen if the United States were to spark a war in the Asia Pacific against China. So the United States is not prepared. It's not ready. It's all over. And the China's successful defeat of the US's spy network is just one example of this. All right, everybody. That is the stories for tonight. All right. So yeah, let's get into some quick announcements. This is the last live stream of the year. Okay. So I'm not going to be around tomorrow, and then I will be back probably later in the week. I am trying to line up some guests. I have the Duran, I believe, um, lined up for lined up for January 4th in the afternoon. We're going to go over Ukraine 2023, 2024 prospects, latest developments around that question. And so they'll be coming on January 4th. And then I'm trying to get Michael Hudson back on the show. That'll probably be mid-January. I am hoping the 12th, I believe it is, 11th or 12th. So those are the next phases for this channel in terms of guests so far. Of course, I'll let you know if there are any other updates. With that said, in terms of other announcements, of course, first, the quick plugs. Of course, hit that like button if you haven't yet. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. Hit that notifications bell if you haven't yet. Hello to everybody on Rumble. Hello to everyone on Rockfin. Can't forget the Rumble and Rockfin communities. Thank you all for tuning in. Supposedly, this was streamed on Instagram on Meta because that's a new feature. But I do not know if that actually occurred at all because Meta, surprisingly enough, or unsurprisingly enough, given how ridiculous that institution is, does not provide you the ability to mute the stream. So I would be hearing the stream as I'm going this whole time. That's very inefficient and ineffective. But nonetheless, uh, hopefully it was viewing on Instagram. If not, sorry about that. This was also, I think, viewing on X, I believe. I think I did it on X. I want to confirm that. Actually, yes, I am on X. Um, so welcome everyone who's watching from X, formerly known as Twitter. And yeah, so hit that like button, subscribe button, notifications bell if you're on YouTube. Of course, hit that like button, engage how you can on the other platforms. Do support my work in the video description on YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin. I don't know if I do video descriptions. I let you guys support how you want, tips, etc. But Patreon, Substack, YouTube membership. I know we got a few members. I'm going to shout you out in a bit. PayPal, buy me a coffee, all great ways to support on this holiday season, this channel, and the work that I do here. I really greatly appreciate all of you for everything you've been able to do free or as paid members of this channel. But let me get to some shout outs really quickly. Okay. We have a super sticker from Kier. Thank you so much for that. We have TL Boss. Ask Scott what we can do to stop people causing these problems in the world. Okay. Yes. Scott's a good friend of the show. Super sticker from Conan, $5. Thank you. Juliet Leak said, Happy New Year. Thank you, Danny. Thank you so much, Juliet. Appreciate it. Hope I see you around sometime soon. Casey Anthony got away with it. Thanks for coming back. What is a percentage or chance that the U.S. or UK Black Ops Epstein Zelensky? Because he has way too much dirt on both governments to be allowed to exist. Well, this is a important thing. I mean, I thought the same thing happened to Mr. Bin Laden back in the day when he was captured or supposedly captured in 2011. Yeah, I don't think he will last very long, honestly. He's a marked man. He's either going to be given what I would call a kind of a house arrest, right? I mean, if we think about this, even if he's whisked away, taken away in any capacity, he will be essentially on house arrest. He will go to some island. He will go somewhere, maybe in the US, maybe in Canada, maybe somewhere else, exiled. And his only protection is that he remains silent and lives in isolation forever. If he does not accept that, or if that doesn't happen, if a different choice is made for him, which is very likely, yes, I think him being taken out of the picture is very much possible. I also think him maybe being trapped in Ukraine following this and essentially put under another kind of de facto house arrest is also very possible. There are many possibilities for Zelensky, but the more he's hated and the more problematic he becomes, the more dangerous it becomes for him. And the worse that things get for the conflict in Ukraine on the US and NATO side, the worse things get for Zelensky. So we will see what happens exactly, but I do think that this is a very plausible scenario. And I do think Zelensky's future is probably what will be the next domino to fall when it comes to the failing Ukraine conflict. So we have a couple new members here. We have Jonathan House. Thanks so much for becoming a member. We have Gordon Mitchell becoming a member. You can all hit that join button, become a member. $3.99 per month goes a long way supporting this channel on YouTube. Sorry, put that back up. Casey Anthony got away with it again. Thank you so much. The last time the Clinton administration increased amount of USD, there were 5.575 trillion USD in circulation. Had USD kept up with the population, there should be at least 6.95 trillion. At last count, we now have 23.33 trillion US dollars. The Uniparty robbed us. Indeed. I mean, this is an empire, not just of lies, but it's of debt. We have this massive circulation of money happening in the United States to pay off corporate the thieves. They're to pay up the corporate robber barons, those who have taken everything from us. They get bailed out, they get subsidized with essentially printed money. And our tax dollars are used to further subsidize the military industrial complex and the banks. So it's all one big uh, uh, it's one big massive theft essentially of our wealth, and that is essentially how this massive debt gets built, printing money, continuing to increase the expenditures needed to prop up these failing institutions. And you essentially have a country and an economy that is living off of this debt and then in burdening and indebting ordinary people in order to facilitate this, right? Because that indebtedness is really where the big profits lie. Everything else is just to sustain the stability of the economy, or at least the faux stability that we see now. So, yes, it is a big problem. That's why you have just constant neoliberalization, austerity, pushed down our throats amid massive government expenditures in militarism, war, etc. That's the crux of geopolitics. Arlene from my Patreon. So, Patreon members get to ask questions, suggest guests, even bring up topics and ask for things to be brought up. And so, Arlene on Patreon, she said, Danny, please mention how the working class is affected by these geopolitical developments, the working class all around the world. And it's important to make this connection that geopolitics is not merely about conflicts among nations. People are caught in the crossfire. Those countries building a new world, especially Russia and China, it's no secret why their people of Russia, people of China, have seen increases in their standard of living, see a brighter future ahead of them. It's not because they're so strong, they can stand up to the US and they don't have to worry about a war destroying them. That's one part of it. It's also because people in these countries have an understanding that their governments, their economic systems are serving them. So Chinese people can bet on their wages increasing year after year after year. They can bet on new infrastructure. Russian people can bet on the calamity that was the fall of the Soviet Union to continue to find rectification, that there will be increased solutions to getting Russian people in all of their diversity jobs, economic opportunities, as well as the stability needed to take advantage of them in terms of security, etc. So this is what people in Russia and China and elsewhere in the world too can look forward to. And people in the United States, working people in the US and the West, have the exact opposite picture ahead of them. Coming into 2024, people in the United States and the larger collective West are looking at, especially younger people, are looking at basically a future that isn't a future at all. They're looking at no future. They're seeing their prospects of living a decent life, basically just even having the basic necessities of housing, of food, of education and jobs. These things are increasingly becoming tenuous, harder to manage, harder to keep, harder to even obtain for millions upon millions. Meanwhile, the wars that the US and their European vassals are funding, are facilitating, are engaging in, are having direct ramifications on the economic situation for these very same ordinary people. When I was in Europe, it was shocking for me to witness the prices. It wasn't just tourism prices. I wasn't going and gallivanting only to eat at tourism, tourist restaurants or whatnot, which you can always expect to be expensive. I'm just talking about public transit, for example, in Germany when I was in Berlin. Pretty expensive. Talking about going to Prague and just walking the streets, trying to find the local spots and viewing what it was like to buy a cup of coffee or to get a beer, just massively expensive things to do, even in areas that weren't considered tourism, although much of Prague has been turned into a tourist trap, of course. But nonetheless, it was hard to imagine how, with food prices and energy prices being what they were, how ordinary people lived at all, given that, I mean, in the Czech Republic, the Czech crown is so devalued. And it just, it just was, it didn't make any sense to me. But at the same time, I come from the United States and I had a lot of, there was a lot of relatability there because so many people in the United States are worrying about these very things. And so these wars, the war in Ukraine, the sanctions on Russia, they've had direct ramifications, a huge impact on how people are living in the collective West. And it isn't a pretty sight. And it's not necessarily going to get better, because no matter how much kind of stabilization happens, interest rates go slightly down. We're seeing a new normal, to use that term. We're seeing a new normal of whatever stabilization happens, it is stabilizing at the worst ends. Have you been to the grocery store lately in the United States? Because I have, and I'm still seeing eggs close to $8 to $12 for a dozen. I mean, depending on where you go, but that is a huge increase from what it was just prior to the pandemic. So then every new normal comes a stabilization that is far worse than what existed prior. And this was true of prior economic crises. And so these geopolitical calamities are directly related. The US is flailing about trying to maintain its hegemony because it cannot stabilize not only its ability to control and influence world affairs, but it does not have the capacity to stabilize the economic situation for itself and the collective West. It has had to rely on destroying Europe in many ways to stabilize itself in this current period, but eventually all channels will be lost. This was the writing on the wall that people like Ho Chi Minh talked about, that people like Karl Marx, like Lenin, people like this talked about. They talked about how all social systems rooted in exploitation, especially imperialism, have limitations that will eventually be met. That eventually these contradictions, these conflicts and struggles in various areas, especially among the classes, will reach such a point that only change can come about. And we are increasingly seeing how the ruling elite of the United States in particular, especially the financial elite, are losing control and trying to throw everything in the bag of war in order to pulverize the world into submission, including the national security state in the United States and Europe. They're trying to pulverize people into submission so they do not rise up. That's what Israel is trying to do to the people of Gaza. They're trying to say, you can never rise up again because we will just destroy all of you. Well, that really is the aim, of course, in different terms and different forms, different paces, different conditions and circumstances, but really that's the larger aim of the ruling elite as a whole. They do not want us to rise up. They do not want us to have access to information that gets to the truth of the matter. They don't want any of that. They want us to submit, to continue moving in the same way, to not challenge the system, and to get on board with the next war. So, thank you so much for all those questions in the comments so far. But here's Karina. Thank you for the strong analysis, Danny. Thank you so much for being a regular viewer, Karina. Appreciate it. And for the super chat, of course. And then we have Far with the super sticker, and we have Buster Peak for a super sticker. Thank you so much for the generosity, everybody. So let's see. It's about 11 o'clock. All right. Some people are saying they're amazed I'm still here. Don't get me started, man. Don't open the floodgates, because with all that said, amazed I'm still here. So let me just do one more plug before I get to the chill period, and then, before you go, hit that like button, subscribe button, notifications bell. But on this holiday season, consider becoming a supporter. I'm going to shout out some new supporters now because I see them rolling in. Patreon is the best because you get the most perks. My content is not free of paywall, but you get the ability to ask questions, connect. You get the ability to suggest guests, which I really would appreciate, actually, if you guys have any suggestions. Um, you have free PDF copy of my book, which you can see right there on American Exceptionalism for 2019, and much more. So that's Patreon, but Substack, YouTube, if you prefer those avenues, very similar. Although YouTube, they need to work on their membership, but become a YouTube member if that's easier for you because you're here more. It's very convenient, very easy. You just hit join. Substack is a great place. People love Substack. You get access to my archives, my articles, things like that. You always get notified. Okay, you always get notified on these early, especially on these venues on these platforms first, and if not early. So that's a great thing as well. So that I offer. So please do consider that. It's all in the video description. Of course, buy me a coffee and PayPal are great as well if you just want to do one time. So, okay. So now on to some more announcements because I see some. So I have Anon has just become a member during this stream. I'll just assume Anon on Patreon. Thank you so much. We have Harold, who has become a new paid member on Substack. So thank you so much for those new contributions. Okay. I think we have another super sticker. Yes, super sticker. Here we go. Alex Fox. Thank you so much. That's very generous of you. Okay, everybody. So that's it for the content. Okay. I'll stay on for another 15, 20 minutes, maybe. So any requests, anything you want to hear me talk about, I'll just rant about the year. It's been quite a year. I mean, it's had its struggles for sure. It's had its huge bright spots. I mean, the growth of this channel, massive bright spot. I never thought doing this. I still see some big critics of my work here in terms of my skill and my form and all of that. Fine. I get it. Can't satisfy everybody. But, to see this channel growing the way it has, for all of you to come here with pretty regular, I guess with immense regularity because of the numbers that on these streams and even on the clips, it's great. It's been amazing that my content, what I put out there, the messages that I put out there, the way I break things down, that you find it accessible and helpful. And the message generally is all the same. I generally try to circle back to a position of we need to break down, we need to be part of breaking down US hegemony. We need to enter into a new world order. No, not NWO conspiracy. No, a new world order based on the principles of peace, prosperity, self-determination for all, especially those who have historic relationship and current to subjugation. And that's what I circle back to. And that includes Russia, includes the great powers that are emerging in front of us. It's not just the most oppressed. This is what a lot of my friends or maybe not so friendly people anymore fail to do. They look at Russia and China as just powers into themselves. They don't need solidarity. They don't need help. They don't need people speaking out on their behalf. And I think that's wrong, right? It's wrong. It falls into a kind of a new McCarthyism. So all of this work that I do here circles back to we need to fight the new McCarthyism. We need to fight the Cold War mentality. We need to, of course, stand up for the people of Gaza. We need to stand up for Russia. We need to stand up for China. We need to stand up for Iran. We need to stand up to any country and any people that is targeted by U.S. hegemony, by U.S. imperial ambitions, by its aggression, by its military, economic, and other maneuvers to impose suffering at their toward their benefit. That is the roots of this channel. That is where I come from. That is where geopolitics need to be, I believe, analyzed from. Yeah, sure. We can get into the military breakdowns. What is the Western mainstream media saying? What is the situation on the battlefield? Ukraine. What is happening in Asia Pacific, Taiwan, etc.? What's happening in Gaza? Yeah, we can talk about all of that in the nuts and bolts. But at the end of the day, it's where do you stand on this, right? Because if you're going to play the position of, well, we shouldn't be standing with anybody, just give those facts and don't do anything with them, then, well, you can make that decision for yourself. But this channel will always be geared toward moving us toward a better world, a more peaceful world, but a world with justice, not just peace, a world where the people of Palestine have freedom, where the people of Ukraine can live without the threat of NATO subversion and occupation, where Russia does not have to worry about NATO encirclement, where China and Russia don't have to worry about nuclear war and military encirclement from the US and its vassal states, where the people all over the world, Latin America, do not have to worry about militarization from the United States, Monroe Doctrine like policies. They don't have to worry about people like Malay chopping up their social systems and economic systems and essentially privatize everything and then wave the Israeli flag. All of this over and over and over again. People of Niger don't have to worry about anymore the fact that their wealth is being stolen through French neocolonialism and the imposition of the CFA franc. I can go on and on and on, but the biggest developments of 2023 have all shown us that people are fighting back. Oppressed nations are fighting back. A multipolar world is in birth, whether it was that historic meeting between Xi Jinping and Putin showing the world that these two countries are ready to take the lead, whether it was the historic BRICS expansion, Niger really kicking out the French, Burkina Faso, and Mali, and these countries coming to the aid of Niger. Regardless of which event you want to talk about, for me, 2023 was about the growth of this new world, of this multipolar world, and it's been very heartening to cover it with all of you and to have success here. And so it's been a wild ride. I mean, this year has been full of ups and downs, full of this work takes a lot of time, and I appreciate all the support for it. So I got more super chats and what have you. I have a new member, Rodolfo. Thanks so much for becoming a member. We have again, Casey Anthony. Which Asian nations in the next 3 years are most likely to join BRICS? Oh gosh. Oh wow. Well, I know Indonesia is on the I think is next up. I really, other than Indonesia though, I mean Bangladesh I know wants to join. I mean you said East Asia though, right? East Asia? No, just Asian nations. Okay, so Bangladesh I know wants to join. I know Indonesia is right there, and it's most likely it's going to be in the next round. It's not a guarantee, right? But it's likely that it will be. So you have Indonesia, you have Bangladesh. Of course, you have dozens of countries. So most of the ASEAN countries want to join. Okay. But it's hard to know which. And then you have the Central Asian countries, of course, like Kazakhstan, for example, which are wild cards. Not sure if that will happen, but they do want to join. So, I would say that those countries probably in Asia are in the lead. Pakistan's another interesting one. I don't think we're going to see it necessarily, but Pakistan's relationship with China and Russia is also very good, but especially China economically with the China-Pakistan economic corridor. But it's unsure whether its political leadership is ready to join something like BRICS. Thailand, maybe, but of course, Thailand is also a political wild card. So there's a lot of wild cards in Asia. I would love to see Vietnam jump into this, but politically, I think Vietnam is really hedging bets right now and does not want to make huge waves in that realm while being a supporter, of course, of ASEAN's overall move toward multipolarity. So I think Indonesia, Bangladesh, Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan, I think that is likely going to be the countries that join next, but it's unclear whether that will be the next round. I don't know. I don't know if that will be the next round, to be honest. Um, so yeah, it's going to be interesting nonetheless. And uh Ada Utopian bought 3 coffees and saying it's never easy to take a stand against one's own country, but you're definitely on the right side of history. Kudo to your courage and righteousness. Thank you so much to Ada Utopian. Buy me a coffee. No, it's not easy. And it's interesting. Uh because there's many schools of thought here. I mean, Scott Ritter's a good friend of the show. He's been on the show many times. He will be on the show again soon. Um, I know he's traveling right now, but I'll try to on the show soon. And he always talks that he loves his country, right? He loves his country. And sorry about this. That was a mistake. And I've been having a lot of thoughts about this because a lot of people are coming to an anti-war position with this love of country and dare I say patriotism, right? There's been a lot of debates. I've been on them, and I've been on the position of staunch criticism of American patriotism, and I still hold those beliefs that American patriotism is rooted in a American exceptionalist mentality, and that while love of one's country, love of the United States, sure, could be diverted into means that are progressive. Generally, they are not. And that's because we live in a society that is not dominated by a progressive nationalism, so to speak, like what has existed in the global south and the third world, so called, um, for years and years and years since the first independence movements against the colonial order. But really a reactionary nationalism based on viewing oneself as above others so that the political, military, and economic agenda of a tiny few people is more easily met. So while I still hold that position, I never said that people who view themselves as patriotic or view themselves as loving their country are necessarily people that are pariahs or enemies. It always matters what you do in the end. If you use your patriotic sentiment to slap people over the face with it for not being patriotic, for claiming that a movement cannot win without being patriotic, that people have to all view the patriotism in the same way in order to win over working people, I just don't believe that. But if individuals believe themselves to be patriotic and also stand up to war and stand up to the war machine and things like that, then sure, that is totally fine. So I've been having an opinion, a changing view, not a changing view on this, but an evolving view on this, because I do believe that, someone like Scott Ritter, he loves his country. I view the United States, if we look at it as a country, I look at the people of the United States. I truly do love the people of the United States, especially ordinary people, working people, those who are trying to get by, those who are trying to live a better life and understand the world around them. I do have deep love for the people who do not have power and are thus exploited and taken advantage of at every turn. I view myself as one of those people. So, I have deep love for those people. And so if that means love for my country, sure, I love those people and I do not want to see the people be abused and oppressed. Um, do I have love for the government or love for what it has represented or love for any of that? No, I do not. So I think it's important to understand that contradiction. And I want to go further and note. So you see these words. This is the Constitution of the Republic of Vietnam, written August 1945, and that's to make it's that cool little artsy dynamic there to construct his face, Ho Chi Minh's face, the first president of Vietnam. But the Declaration of Independence of Vietnam was tailored on the Declaration of Independence of the United States. So you could say, wow, Vietnam, the revolutionaries, they really appreciated the U.S. They love the U.S. They love everything it stood for. No, actually, what they appreciated was that language and how it could be applied to their circumstances in an attempt to appeal in a moment where the U.S. was rising up as the next superpower, and the fact that the United States was trying to hedge its bets and weaken Europe. The Vietnamese leadership said, well, it is time to stand with anyone who will help our cause, and we can learn and emulate this for now. And this will be advantageous to us now because, yes, liberty and freedom and independence and these things are very much relevant to the Vietnam movement and the Vietnamese cause. So, in effect, I will stand with anybody. I don't you love country, patriotic, all of this in any kind of way. If your actions are with the people and what you do, what you say is to move forward the cause of the people. But but at the same time, it is when we start making patriotism the agenda rather than the politics, positions, the economics. That's when I start to get suspicious because I don't believe in wasting time on that. I think we can navigate conversations. I think my channel, I hope, is a good example of that. We can navigate conversations about many things in a manner that gets us to talk about the common issues that we agree on. And if we have ideological differences, well, we can work those out as we go along. But at the same time, if we agree on really important things and we have love for the people, no matter how we define it, then we should work together and we should work together to move things forward. So we have more super stickers. Okay, here we go. Penny says, discuss toxic cost of growing green. I mean, this isn't my expertise. Look, the ruling elite have exploited the so-called climate change, anti-climate change movement, environmental movement for their own aims, co-opted it, destroyed it, made it into an arm of essentially the war machine of the national security state. And it's all, of course, it's all BS because the elite doesn't care. They're actually continuing to pollute the world, especially with regards to militarism and continued fracking and all of this fraudulent stuff. But at the same time, I am not someone who agrees with the position that, well, we need to go back to tradition and just uh, continue to industrialize in the way that we've been industrializing. That's why I like to look at China and even countries that are not as Vietnam's a good example of this. Many countries, most countries want to clean up their air. They want to reduce the effects of pollution and of environmental degradation, but they still want to grow. And so I think it's important to bridge those two things and to move forward accordingly, because I'm not going to ask any global south country, any oppressed country to give up their ability to industrialize, their ability to develop. But at the same time, I do think, and China is a testament to this, because I've been now twice, and every time I've heard, well, the smog used to be horrific here, and it's not anymore. Well, there used to be, because of all this industrialization, no trees, no greens, no forest. All of that was taken away. Well, now there's massive reforestation. Oh, the cities, you used to not be able to breathe in them because of all the vehicle smog and all of the exhaust. Well, there's a lot of renewable energy out there now. So there is, of course, always going to be in a world dominated by a tiny few corporations that control most things, and not all countries have the ability to stand up to them. Um, there will always be profiteering from this. And of course, there's a lot of contradictions to fixing or addressing environmental concerns under the circumstances we live under. But at the same time, I don't think we should give up that. I will never say I'm anti addressing the effects of pollution or factory farming or any of that. But I don't want it to be addressed at the expense of working people. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think both can be done. And I think that's the challenge ahead of us. But thank you, Penny, for your super chat. Then we have Casey. Anthony got away with it. Would it behoove Syria to make an alliance with Turkey in exchange for helping expel the U.S. and Israel in the Golan Heights? Turkey would get the disputed north of Syria because the Syrians because then Syria can rebuild. I mean, I think Syria is going to do what it can to it's going to do what it can. And so would it behoove Syria to make an alliance with Turkey? Oh, God. That's a question. It's a huge question because Turkey is hard to trust, right? Turkey is hard to trust. Turkey is not a country that you can say will be friendly, but at the same time, that will abide by agreements and whatnot. And it's always hedging bets. Erdogan is always hedging bets. But I think Syria will do diplomatically what it needs to do to get to that rebuilding process. And so I'm not going to say anything's off the table, but would it behoove Syria to do this? I think maybe other changes need to happen regionally. I think mainly what needs to happen is the U.S. needs to get the F out because it's hard to imagine this happening without the United States wrestling its control. If Syria said, okay, we'll give that up. See, Turkey would be taking a huge risk too. Now that I'm looking at this, it's like I don't think Turkey would ever help Syria free the Golan Heights from Israel. I just don't think Turkey has that in them. I think they're too compromised. So when I look at this, I'm like, if it were possible, maybe, but do I see it as possible? The Golan Heights, I just don't see Turkey being politically motivated to go that far, which means what is Syria really going to get out of this? It's a lot of wealth to give up, man. It's a lot of wealth. Syria, that northern territory, it's a lot of wealth to give up. If Syria is going to truly rebuild, I think it needs that oil wealth back in that water, those water systems. Everything that's being stolen from it needs to stop. So I'll go with no on this, but of course, I think it's probably a little more complex. There could be something in between an alliance and maybe no alliance, if that makes sense. So that's my opinion. Rodolfo said Erdogan is the toxic boyfriend of girl. Yeah. Nah, it's Erdogan is like that. Yeah, just gaslighting all the time. Honestly. So, all right, everybody. Think I might head out. Okay. I'll head out. Let me see if I can do something here. All right. Mhm. Let's see. All right. I want to show you this. Let's hope no number comes up. Yeah, you can see that photo, right? Some people are asking for the dog. There's the dog. It's a photo, though. I'm not gonna do the whole move in the setup. All right. There's the dog. There's Eugene sitting by the Christmas tree in his little area. Yeah, there are some things I didn't get to mention. I see in the chat. Yes, Argentina is leaving BRICS. South Africa has instituted. I couldn't get to all stories today. South Africa submitted the International Court of Justice to invoke the Genocide Convention. All big stories. And somebody said, "Can you elaborate on the meaning of wrapping it up?" Wrapping it up just means ending. So there's Eugene. He was having some stomach issues lately because we tried to switch his food to something a little more healthy. He's got a real sensitive stomach. It didn't matter how slow we went. It did not end well. So we've had kind of a week or so of just battling with, not bad, like not in the house or anything, but just, the character of his, his number two has been a little stressful. And so back on his old diet, and he's doing good though. He's fine. There he is for you to look at. So yeah, Argentina's out of BRICS. Malay is a disaster. I was with a friend recently, and I said he's a temporary disaster. And what do I mean by that? Look, Argentina's politics are complex. I don't know how much hope I have in a kind of resurgence of even just the progressives there that are for multipolarity and whatnot. That's a complicated political situation, but what I will say is that I think Malay is going to just have so many people hating on him soon that he's just not gonna. I don't think he's gonna be a long-term political project there. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that Argentina's situation gets any better. And so, while I do have hope that Malay is a temporary phenomenon, one that will be quite damaging in the short term, long term, it's unclear where Argentina is going to go. But withdrawing from BRICS is a very bad idea. It's it's disappointing, but at the same time, not surprising. I don't think China, Russia, these other countries, especially Iran, were very surprised by this. I think if you look at the landscape of a country like Argentina, it's got a long ways to go before it reaches a stability, especially politically. That sovereignty just hasn't been there. So until it gets that sovereignty that it needs to stand up to the US, it's always going to be this very indebted country with so much potential, but indebted, impoverished, and ultimately under the thumb of the United States. And I don't think Malay is any kind of independent force. I just can't stand when people try to say, "Oh, you're libertarian." No, I don't care what he calls himself. He is a servant. He's a servile agent of the empire to the north. That's what he is. And then of course, the genocide convention, huge for South Africa to do that. So I salute the ANC. I salute South Africa for once again standing up for against apartheid, standing with the Palestinian people. But at the same time, the ICJ, the ICC. I mean, these bodies are not. They just don't have teeth to them. We'll see. This could have of course, as a public relations blunder. It would be a big step for South Africa in terms of its assertiveness on the world stage to see this through, regardless of whether there are consequences, which there won't be for Israel. But to see it through would be huge for South Africa, and so I support it in the main. But I also think that there is a huge problem internationally, which is that countries, entities, I should say, like Israel and the United States, for that matter, NATO, etc. There's nothing internationally that can hold them accountable. The best force to hold them accountable is what Russia has done, what China has done, what Iran has done, what these countries has done. Build up your self-reliance, build up your self-defense, build up your ability and capacity to stand up to the empire, and it will crumble in front of you like a paper tiger that it is. And that's the best defense right now. These international institutions, while important to defend the principles, important to ensure that they are exposed and that the forces of unipolarity are exposed when they exploit them and when they misuse them, etc. They're built to serve those unipolar force, and so regardless of the rhetoric, and so that's the big challenge. Dmitry Polanski, the ambassador to the UN for Russia, when I was at the UN giving my Security Council speech, he said to me after the Security Council meeting that they convened and I spoke at, he said, the biggest problem with the UN is that it is completely and wholly, the Security Council is captured by the United States and its partners. And so only when the mechanism changes in form, not just more members from the global south, because you could look at the UN Security Council and say, okay, the permanent members are about, 2/5 or 2/6, 2/5 non-Western, multipolar, you could say. And then if you expand it to the non-permanent members, usually it's more than that. So you could say, oh, well, it looks like it serves more than just the West and the unipolar world. But because it is structured in the way that it is, because the US can exercise veto power and it's, UK, France can exercise veto power as permanent members, they could basically control what happens there. Basically, no progress comes out of there. And That's why it's so difficult for something like Gaza to find any kind of resolution on the floor of the Security Council. So, in effect, those are those big developments, but at the same time, we got to understand the limitations. All right, everybody. It's been a wonderful year. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. That's the dog. It's been a wonderful year. I'm gonna wrap it up here. I got 90 minutes. Oh, the last announcement. Last announcement. All right. Here we go. We got 30 people waiting right now for the 1 a.m. stream on the Aussie Cossack show at on YouTube. I'm gonna put the link in the chat again. It's also in the video description. 1 a.m. Eastern time in about 90 minutes. I will be live with Sarah of DD Geopolitics and on the Aussie Cossack show that will be airing there. So be sure to save your place. We'll continue the conversation. We'll get into, I think, more than just what I was able to cover here. So it's a good extension to this stream. They're great. DD Geopolitics. If you have not subscribed to them yet, subscribe to their YouTube channel because they do some really good work. They have a massive Telegram channel and X account as well, where they do live updates on the conflict in Ukraine and the multipolar world, and they get you the news. So you should follow their Telegram and Twitter as well, X account. But you can find all that, I'm sure, in the video description of their channel of the show coming up. But do follow them on YouTube because they're a growing channel. They deserve to be seen. It's hard to build up a YouTube channel. It took a lot of work to get where I'm at now. And it's always tenuous in the sense that you never know when you're going to be. Now I got people, it's maybe I should be honored. I have people scrubbing my videos and calling it their own, taking my videos and saying, and basically it doesn't show up on copyright because they adjust it, but all the text, all this, audio, and even my big part of the video is basically just what I did. And they say it's there on video. So, there's a lot of challenges to growing here, a lot of bad faith stuff happening, but also, and of course, no credit given, which drives me nuts. But and I can get into the intricacies of that some other time. But it's also just, YouTube itself, these platforms, you never know when you're going to go. If we're going to quote Nas and AZ, life's a BI, you know what? You just never know when you're going to go off of YouTube. They could take you off at any time. Censors are pretty big. Demonetization is always a real thing. It happens all the time. Anything on Palestine, you betcha. Anything, if I ever cover any kind of, if there's any, even just military imagery related to Palestine, forget it's demonetized. And a lot of people have been banned, of course. So that's why I say, definitely follow DD Geopolitics on YouTube. And of course, follow me here, subscribe, all that good stuff, like the stream. But that's why I say definitely hit my alternative platforms. If you can be a paid member on Patreon, Substack, YouTube, etc., that's great. But there's also Telegram that's free, Substack, you can subscribe for free. Those are great ways in the video description to follow my work if I'm ousted on here. Rumble, of course. I keep forgetting to promote Rumble. But Rumble is a great way. Just search my name, Danny Dhaiphong. Rockfin is another good way too. So, Rumble, Rockfin, just go to Danny Dhaiphong and follow me, subscribe there because you never know. You just never know. All right. Okay, everybody. There we go. Those are the announcements. Before you go, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notifications bell. This is the last stream of 2023, so I want to wish you all a happy new year. 2024 will be significant, magnificent. It will be just momentous. I am sure the world is rapidly changing, and 2024 is going to be another year of this. I want to wish all of you good health, good spirits. I want to wish all of you the best of what can be expected, at least. I hope that all of you find love, joy, some kind of happiness amid incredibly challenging circumstances, domestically and globally, wherever you are. And yeah, I just want to wish all of you that because, to sit here and to watch something like this, that means you're definitely my kind of people. So I just want to salute all of you. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. Before you go, of course, hit that like button, do all that good stuff, like subscribe, hit that notifications bell. And if you can, become a supporter in the video description, Patreon, Substack, YouTube, hit the join button, PayPal, buy me a coffee. But with all that said, tomorrow, yes, I'm going to New Year's Eve party. I'll post on social media where I'll be. I'm actually very excited because it is a friend of the show who invited me to their party. And I can't wait to spend that time. My wife's working overnight, so it's just going to be me. But I'll post some photos on social. Hopefully, I'll get a photo op with the person in question, and I'll post it around. And we'll have some fun on New Year's Eve as well. So anyway, goodbye, good night to 2023. If I don't see you on YouTube again, take good care. And I will see you again in 2024 very soon. Bye-bye.